Okay, so now here are three new concepts. Now, they're almost new because they were present in, some eco-theologians would talk about these, or, it would kind of be present in different manners. But it was never written in an official document by a pope. So that's why it's new. And I mean, before Laudato Si was published, I read every church statement that came out, mostly from popes, but also from the magisterium or even from other churches. And these are three new concepts that were just not present before. So let's explore them. And I have to tell you just before, they might be slightly controversial because we're not used to seeing things this way. Eco-theology brings us in this direction, but we certainly weren't told this in Sunday school, in catechesis, and we don't hear that during homilies. So here they are, three new concepts. The first one is to love creation and love creatures. Say, what? Before 2010, or before Laudato Si, people were not able to say to love creation. Okay, this came about with Laudato Si. I started hearing it. But otherwise, I never saw it on print. I never heard it. And Pope Francis insists that we should not only be careful, not only respect, but we're called to love creation, to love every creature and live fraternally with them. Jesus also told us that the Father cares for every creature, which makes it an integral part of our faith. Now, why would this be controversial? Well, because Jesus said, there's one big commandment. Love God and love your neighbor as yourself. He even says during his Last Supper in John, love one another as I've loved you. So there's this idea of loving other humans and loving God, but then when it comes to the material world, we don't get this clear commandment from Jesus. But it doesn't take a very long stretch to actually adopt that. If you go see Psalm 145, it says God loves everything He created. We find this in Psalm 104. We find this in so many passages from the Bible. In Genesis 1, He calls them into existence. And lots of the church fathers said that God loves His creatures, and we are called to love His creatures. And we're made in God's image. So, even though Jesus didn't tell us directly to love creation, to love all creatures, it's not a far stretch, because we know, like in places like Job 38, 39, that God created different creatures, and He has a direct relationship with them without us. Without us as intermediaries. Okay, so that's number one, to love. That's a novelty. Number two, humans don't own the earth. This is actually a departure from the social doctrine of the church. Because I read it, about 10 years before Laudato Si was published. So the update wasn't in there. And I found that it described how we are owners and how to be responsible owners, and, about owning the earth. And that passage disturbed me. 10 years before Laudato Si already, it was disturbing me because the biblical tradition reminds us over and over that we do not own the land. The best example, Psalm 24, verse 1, where God owns the earth and everything in it. So that's very clear. So there's a very, very strong biblical tradition saying we don't own, but the social doctrine was pointing in that direction. So it's been updated since. But wow, okay, this I am the descendant of a settler that arrived in North America from Europe, 350 years ago. And so there was a sense of coming from somewhere else and then owning the land. We've been bathing in colonialism for such a long time. It's hard to get out of that, to say we don't own it. Talk with one of the First Nations and they'll say, no, we don't own the land. We belong to the land. And number 3, in the new concepts brought about from the encyclical, is that humans are not the purpose of other creatures. In other words, they were not created for us, but they were created by God and for God. I've heard in many church contexts, let it be in sermons or in catechesis, we say, look at the beautiful world God has created for us. Let us give him thanks. And that really sounds like spoiled children. And I was always disturbed by that. And maybe that's your point of view right now on it, and obviously I respect that. But when I searched in the Bible to find something equivalent, to find the source of that thought, I didn't find it anywhere. I could find a bunch of counterexamples, but I could never find God created the world for us. Even Genesis 1, where human beings are created at the end, we can maybe bring out the interpretation that we're created at the end, showing that everything was made for us. But it's not explicit. It just says that we're made in God's image. It doesn't say that everything was made for us. And then quite the opposite, if we read, for example, Job, chapters 38, 39, 40, well, we see God telling Job that he created all of these different magnificent animals to have a direct relationship with God. No need for humans. He loves them directly, and they were not created for us. And then theologically, where it gets really interesting is the beginning of the letter to the Colossians that was written by Paul, or John's Gospel, chapter 1. In the beginning there was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. And before saying that the Word became flesh, it says that everything came to be for the Word, through the Word. Okay, so it's from the Word and it's for the Word. So the New Testament, many times, John and Paul, they write that, well, finally, we are not the meaning for creation. We're not the purpose for the creation of all these creatures. We are human beings, made in the image and likeness of God, but it wasn't made for us. It was made for the other creatures, and it was made mostly for Christ, who's Alpha and Omega, who's, the purpose of creation. So that asks lots of humility on our part, and probably maybe a little refresh for all of those preaching out there.